to play with you. So tonight on my show, I know we're going to have an amazing show tonight. My guest is an awesome, awesome lady. And I would say you are a quintessential 80s girl, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I'd say she's a quintessential 80s woman who has been through the ups, the downs, the ringer. And she has literally lived to tell her story. And the beauty of her story is that it goes hand in hand with the contribution that she is today on this planet, right? So I'm happy to have her on my show, and we're going to mash it up. So before we do that, I just want to share my week, like I always do. So I want you to know that Corbin, my guest from last week, my son, S-U-N, who ran the streets of New York with me and supported, he's such a sweetheart, opening doors, helping me with things, and really calling me on my SHIT when it comes to having a man in my presence, right? So Corbin is 21 years old. And he was saying things like, Noreen, I'm here, I'm a man, why don't you ask me to do it, right? Why don't you allow me to open the door and have you go through? Or why are you carrying all these heavy bags? I'm here, you can ask me to carry the bags or give me the bags, But what he hit me to or opened my eyes to, the fact is, I'm an extremely independent woman, right? Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But what I am saying is that I have lived and have been living by myself for the longest time, doing everything on my own, going 100 miles a minute. And in the world of me trying to find a man, he hit me to the fact that I need to slow it down and allow men to contribute to me. And it's not that I don't allow them to contribute to me. It's just that it's not the first thought in my head. I know these things, but because it's like habit, right? I'm used to carrying a bag. I'm used to opening my own door, right? So I want to say to Corbin, thank you for bringing that to my attention every single day. And you have my word that I will do better, because now I know better, and I know what the impact of that is on a man, because you at 21 hit me to that. So I just want to say thank you. And today I had my once a month lunch and learn. Of course, it was rip-roaring. It was a lot of fun. A lot of women came out. It was about storytelling, telling your story, whether it's for business or personal. So that was really good. So I'm I will be using the technologies that I've learned on this show. Also, I finished my Acumen. If any of you don't know what Acumen is it's an organization where they offer free online courses. I've just finished doing one of their courses, which was telling stories, which is quite apropos for this week, but telling stories is a 5-week course, and you get to do it with foreigners, people from all across the world. And it was just really great. And so there's no one watching you. You have deadlines to meet. There's no one beating you up if you don't meet a deadline. But I'm proud to say that I completed the course. Out of the 5 people that are in my group, I am the only one that completed the course. And I feel really good about that. So anyway, less of me. Let's get on with the show. So this evening I have Deborah Dunn. So Deborah, welcome to the show. I have to move the mic so I can actually see you. I like to see my guests.
Hi.
So welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. I really,
thank you so
really
much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
You're welcome. So you're not nervous, are you?
No.
Okay, good. So Deb, tell us, can I call you Deb?
Yeah.
Okay, so Deb, tell me, you are originally from Pennsylvania.
I am.
Where you're not Dutch, are you?
No, but I grew up in a little tiny town in the center of Pennsylvania called Bellefonte, near Penn State, and that was the big city, State College. And then when I was going into high school, we moved to Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
So
was that a bigger town?
It was a bigger town, and it was also a farm community, you know. So it was, you know, I woke up in the morning to clip clop of the Amish horse and buggies, and yeah.
So that's some good cheese, though.
But yeah. Yes.
I love Amish cheese. It's the best. That's all I care about is the Amish cheese. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So and then how did you get to school? Did
School
you take
bus.
a bus?
Yeah, school bus.
So
yeah,
you didn't live.
Bus.
You weren't doing the Amish thing. You were just doing
No,
Okay.
no, wasn't Amish.
Great. Did you have any Amish friends?
No, because they're really a pretty segregated community, and they don't attend public school. They only go to school still up to 6th grade.
Right.
And there were Mennonites that were in our high school,
right.
which is a less
they're less Amish.
Yeah, they're less strict.
Right.
So but I would my first job that I ever had was working in a bank, the Leola National Bank, and I started that when I was 16 years old. I'd work part-time in the summer and during the school year. And a lot of Amish people would come in to do their banking. So, you know, I got to know them from that, you know, that perspective where I would let them in their safe deposit box and they'd sit on the floor and cut their coupons of stocks and that kind of stuff. It was, so.
So they didn't live in the world, but they did worldly things.
So you would see them in shops and that sort of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But did you create friendships with them?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Is that because it just wasn't a thing?
It was two very different worlds. Yeah, two very different worlds.
I bet you out of that, I would have had an Amish friend. I would have had an Amish friend. I know I would have had an Amish friend, even if they had to sneak and talk to me. All right. So you were married at age 18, divorced 10 minutes later.
About that.
Pray tell us, how does one do that?
It was, I married my high school sweetheart, and, you know, when I was 18, and then when I was 19, I you know, said, what in God's name have I done here?
Right.
And, you know, was afraid that I would, that I was going to have my mother's life. So, so anyway, I just said, and I eventually ended up running off with a busboy, and I call that phase of my life when the dish ran away with a spoon.
So it wasn't literally 10, because I was like literally.
No, it
10
wasn't.
minutes.
No,
All right.
it wasn't. Really.
So it was like a year. Let's start
it was
a year later.
Yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. So, fly by the seat of my pants. So you've traveled a lot. You've lived in a lot of places, right? Did you miss any? Atlanta, Palm Beach, East Hampton, Mexico, the NYC, LA, and back to New York again, and also India.
And I had a middle husband that was I lived in Switzerland.
So that means you had 3 husbands.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I lived in Switzerland for a while too.
How was that? Good chocolate.
Good chocolate, great bakeries, and very clean and tidy. Yeah.
And what about the yogurt?
Yogurt?
Did they have good yogurt?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Maybe that's just a commercial that, you know, for me, it's like in England, there was a yogurt called Ski. And I guess I always thought of it as Switzerland. So that I thought they had the best yogurt. But I guess that's just the media infiltrating my tiny mind. All right. So, so you lived in all these different places. What had you move around so much?
Why did I move around so much? I would get involved. It would usually be around a man. I would get involved with somebody, and it would, it would take me to wherever. And then when that wasn't working, I would
get out,
take off to the next place. So it was somehow connected with an involvement with a man.
Right. Would you say that you're a romantic, or were you searching for something that you couldn't find within yourself possibly?
Well, I'm sure I was searching, but you know, during that period of time, I was definitely drinking and drugging, so I wasn't so clear, and I wasn't I wasn't clear enough to begin some kind of inner search.
Right. So pretty much, were these men taking care of you, or were they just both unhealthy situations?
Yeah, both unhealthy. No, they weren't. No, they weren't taking care of me. And actually, I would be the person that would be the one that would make the money. I paid the rent. I was the one that was more, I guess, in control. Yeah.
But did you like it that way? That you were the one that was more in control?
Yeah, I think I must have. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But it wasn't something that I thought about, or it just
happened.
And and looking back, you can see a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's the pattern that you saw for yourself? Because you mentioned you didn't want your mother's life, right?
Yeah.
So what did that look like? Because there was a period of time when I said I didn't want my mother's life.
Well, I didn't want to be. I've always had this thing about not being trapped, not being trapped in a lifestyle, or in a lifestyle. And I saw my mother's life as really confining, and that that she was in the house, she took care of the kids, and to me, she had a very narrow life.
Right.
And whatever reason, I wanted a wider, more expansive life.
And when you look at your mother's life today, because I've looked at my mother's life, it was pretty damn good. She was free to do whatever she wanted to. She worked when she wanted to. If she didn't want to, she did whatever she wanted. My father thought the sun shone out of her ass.
Yeah, no, not so.
And
not
he did, because she was sexy.
Now that's I didn't see that in my parents' relationship necessarily. Yeah, she seemed.
Settled? Like she settled?
Yes, and she was a smart woman, and she was a smart woman, and so I felt like she could have had and done a lot more.
Right. So she didn't reach her full potential, and she didn't go beyond it.
Yeah.
But was she a good mother?
She was a good mother. She was a good mother. I mean, she took care of, there were always 3 meals on the table. She was reliable. It was stable. It was a very stable house, very stable home life.
Right. So you knew what stability was.
I knew stability.
Okay, great. So when we'll be, because I don't want to tell the whole story yet. I want to get into like who you are and what you're about. So when we'll get back, we will be getting into some business.
Okie doke.
All right, we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network. Are you stuck in a rut? Negative thoughts, feelings, and conversations got you down? Hi, I'm Noreen Sumpter, the Potentiator. Tune in every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time and listen for new ideas on my show, Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way, on talkradio.nyc.
Who do you want to connect with?
Are you an entrepreneur or intrapreneur looking to build your following?
Welcome to our show.
Follow Me Friday with Joan
and Priya.
Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern
on talkradio.nyc.
We're your digital connectors. Woo woo!
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And so we are back. This is Noreen Sumpter on Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And I have Deborah Dunn on the line, and she is she's going to tell you who she is. But I just wanted to, introduce her, have you hear her story. I also wanted you to know a little bit about her background. She comes from a normal family. You know, she wasn't raised by wolves or goats. And, you know, her life took some turns, ups and downs, and many people might judge it. But, you know, who she has become today is from the sole purpose of how she lived her life going, you know, in the early days. And Deborah is a product of the 50s and 60s, so she knows how to party. So Deborah, tell us a little bit about growing up in the 50s, in the 60s. Just tell us a little about the 60s and the 70s a little bit.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was, I'm like I said before, as I moved to Lancaster. So I moved when I was 15 years old.
Right.
And so it was really important. I didn't know anybody. It was really important for me to have my social life was what was important.
Right,
and so I made a lot of friends, and you know, and part of that, so age 15, that's when we started experimenting.
Right.
You know, lost my virginity in a cornfield, and
Yeah,
you know,
very romantic.
it was the Amish country.
Did he have horns?
Yeah, something like that. And and we started experimenting with drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And again, because it was Lancaster, Pennsylvania at that time, you know, in the 60s. I graduated high school in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had our 50th high school reunion,
Mm-hmm.
which was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But we started experimenting with drinking. And
what kind of drink? 'Cause I'm thinking cider.
Well, whatever hard cider, but whatever we could, you know, we'd get beer, we'd get, you know, whatever alcohol,
Uh-huh.
and whatever alcohol we could drink, and
Right.
or you know, we could steal from a parent's liquor cabinet or something like that, or you know, boys that were older would, you know, buy the alcohol for us, and I was the one that would black out. You know, have big personality changes.
Mhm.
And, you know, I thought that I was the life of the party.
Right. not realizing that you're out cold.
well, eventually out cold.
So tell me, like, so here you are, you're a young girl, you're experimenting with drugs, you're blacking out because you must have been drinking a bit, or, well, you're not exactly a big woman,
No.
right? So,
No.
you know, your body can only carry so much alcohol.
Yeah. And I think for me is the, you know, I had an allergic reaction to alcohol from the beginning.
Mhm.
You know, it wasn't my friend.
Right.
You know, it wasn't my friend. So it, I mean, everybody else could drink what I think would be called normal. And, you know, but once I started drinking, I couldn't stop drinking.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
so I always say that I didn't have a turn off switch.
Right.
You know, it wasn't installed.
I have a turn off switch, like 2, maximum 3. Yeah. So now you're drinking and stuff like that. When did drugs start to take effect?
Yeah, they didn't, after I was, I don't know, I went from Lancaster to Atlanta, and
Mhm.
then from Atlanta to Florida, and then from Florida to the Hamptons. And so once I was working in the Hamptons, was
it like the Hamptons is today?
well, you know what? I haven't been out there for a long time, but I think it was, I mean, it was always a place,
Right.
you know, it was always a place.
Uh-huh.
And for me, what the Hamptons represented for me, that part of my life was I was exposed to lifestyles, and I was exposed to artists and
Right.
writers
Right.
and actors and people that I had no real connection with.
Mhm.
And it was fascinating for me. And I met gay people, and you know, men and women.
Mhm.
And it was exciting for me.
Right.
And it was you know, it was a whole new way of looking at the world. So, and I was 21 years old at that point.
Mhm.
So that really had an influence. For me. And it was, it was also where, Yeah, I mean drugs, and then drugs came into my life at that point.
And
So
what was the first drug that?
well, pot, which
Okay.
you know I never even considered a drug,
Right.
you know, and
So that
and-
means you were smoking it before, or did you start smoking it when you went out there?
I probably was in Florida, but I don't really remember that. Well, I'm sure I was, but
Right.
you know but yeah, definitely in the Hamptons, and then acid and speed.
Mhm.
You know, those drugs came
Mhm.
into my life at that
Mhm.
point.
And so what was it? Because you like to, when I used to take drugs, but I had rules around my drugs, which was
Your own rules.
Yes, my own rules. So I liked Coke, but I had a rule: you never buy it.
Huh.
Right? You never did it during the weekday. I
Mm.
never did it during the weekday. It
Oof.
was only like Friday, Saturday night.
Huh.
Sunday night was cut off,
Huh.
and then Friday, the following Friday, and you never bought it. The boys bought it.
Huh.
Men bought it, or your friends bought it, but I never bought it.
Oh,
right?
see,
I will snort it, but I never bought it because I had this
Yeah.
thing that if I started to spend my hard-earned cash on it, that it will become a habit, and I wasn't giving myself that.
You know,
leeway.
that's amazing. That's really amazing. And that you were able to actually set rules for yourself and abide by them.
Right.
Yeah. That
I'm a
no,
little
I
weird
was
like
yeah. I wasn't there.
Right.
Yeah. I wasn't there.
So you started to take, and that's really the hardest drug I ever really took was Coke.
Huh. Well,
But yeah, so you took
That's
Coke.
it.
What else did you take?
yeah. Crystal meth, you know, and
And I am thinking that crystal meth is like a current drug.
no, it was around. I mean, yeah, that was definitely around. And so definitely I liked up. I wanted to be up. I didn't want to
Down.
and especially because you know my drinking was I'd get lost with the I'd get messy right away.
Mhm.
I'd get messy early.
Mhm.
So with the speed or the crystal meth or cocaine
Mhm.
is I could keep it going.
Right.
I could keep it going without getting quite so messy.
So you did one of the things that, like, for me would have been ultimately scary, was you were shooting it.
Well, eventually. And
How did you get into shooting it? I mean, I can make it up in my mind, but like, how did you get into shooting it?
Well, I had this he was an amazing boyfriend, and I was with him for 5 years. He was an artist, and we traveled, we lived in Mexico together, and he was an amazing guy, and I tortured him with my drinking. He put up with a really messy person, me. And at one point I was managing restaurants here in New York, and
So you were functional.
I was functional. Yeah, I was functional. And with what, at that point I knew that I had an alcohol problem. I stopped drinking alcohol and then just changed over to drugs. So at that point then so I wasn't messy, and I wasn't messy anymore, but I was high all the time.
Flying.
I was high all the time. And I was managing restaurants, and this adorable, handsome man worked in the restaurant, and he had been a Marlboro man. I don't know if do you remember those?
Yeah, I remember.
Cowboy Marlboro men, and he's the one that would take me down to Alphabet City, and we'd go to shooting galleries,
Right.
so that's when I started. That's when I started shooting
So,
drugs.
when I think of shooting galleries, or is what I've seen on television, right?
Yeah.
They were a mess.
They were a mess. I mean, it really just were mattresses on the floor,
Right.
Mattresses on the floor. And, for, a couple bucks, you could get whatever you needed. You could get syringes, you could get whatever you needed.
Right.
And, and I would see women, shooting in the neck or shooting in the hand. And, I don't know, there was something about it that was, it was exciting. It was just one more element of edgy. I liked edgy.
Right.
And there's a part of me today, though I don't do edgy, not like that.
Right.
But I always liked an edge. you know.
Right. So what was I can't even imagine you because I know you as Deborah, right? So, but I'm like, what kind of clothes did you wear?
Well, see, I remember, you know, this restaurant that I worked at, it would have, it would host big parties for the New York City politicians and also actors. And you know, so if a show opened, you know, I would run the floor. So I'd be in long silk dresses and, you know, I would be fancy, I'd be a fancy woman, you know, and then as soon as this was over, we'd jump in a cab.
When you fancy dress?
And wearing my fancy dress, you know, and get in the cab and go down to, you know, Avenue B.
Shooting gallery,
Avenue B and 6th Street. Yeah.
Right. So was it kind of like you lived a double life? Or was you just out there?
Well, you know, it was. I had a day life and I had a night life.
Right.
And it was, And it was,
And when did the two start to cross? Because you can only keep that up for a certain amount.
Yeah. Well, you know, that particular restaurant job, this was the beginning of my bottoming out. Was you know, I never had rules about not buying Coke. You know, there was, I mean, when I needed it, I bought it, you know, and I needed it every day.
Right.
And so I would, because I was managing restaurants, I would go in the safe and I would put a little chit, an IOU in the safe. And eventually,
like a movie. It's like a movie.
Like a movie. And eventually there was
more chits than cash.
There was a surprise audit, and they came in, and I always like to think of it. It was like they opened the safe, and like these little moths flew out of it, you know. And there was no cash in there, just a pile of chits. And you know, the denial that I was actually stealing, because there was no way I could have paid this sum back, and I lost the job. I lost the sum. I don't know. It was thousands of dollars. Thousands of dollars. IOU. Right. You know, and I signed it. You know. Right. And
so clearly, it wasn't like you were stealing because you put an IOU in there.
Well, it again, denial. Denial is a beautiful thing.
And denial is a river in a river in Africa. So we'll be right back. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Are you into comics, movies, and pop culture at large? What about music and TV? Then you're in for a treat. This is Michael Dolce, your host on TalkingAlternative.com. I've been professionally writing comic books, screenplays, and music articles for almost 15 years. Catch my show, Secrets of the Sire, at its new primetime slot, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and get the inside scoop on the pop culture universe you love to talk about. For more info, go to secretsofthesire.com.
Are you feeling unhappy with your body, shape, or size? Ever feel out of control with food? I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul. Join me to uncover the root to these imbalances and discover a permanent solution to living a healthy life. Join us every Wednesday at my new time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on talkradio.nyc.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
So we're back. This is Noreen Sumpter on Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And tonight I'm speaking with Deborah Dunn, and she's sharing with us her life where she used to take intravenous drugs, coke, and a chitty, for those of you that do not know, is the equivalent of an IOU, which would be like you take a Post-it note, you write $10 on it, and you put I owe you $10, and then you sign it. So that is what a chitty is, okay? Just for those of you that don't know. Okay, so we're back. So you what happened when they audited?
Yeah,
I got fired. You didn't get arrested.
No, no. Well, yeah, I think. I mean, he could have definitely pressed charges.
Right.
But we had a little thing going on the side, so I think I got a.
Girl, you were working it from all angles,
honey. Oh, honey,
you were just working it.
I was dismissed.
You were dismissed, but did he dismiss you entirely?
He did entirely.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
All right, got it.
He washed his hands.
He washed his hands. All right, I'm done with you. So Deb, so now you're strung out, right? Strung out. What's that song? Is it Lost and Turned Out? Like you're strung out.
Yeah.
So what was life looking like?
Well, then I had two dear friends that moved from New York to LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I was living in a sublet apartment,
mm-hmm.
and now I had no job.
Snorted up all the money. I mean, you shot up all the money.
Definitely, and there was an unwanted pregnancy that happened,
mm-hmm.
and I called my friends in LA, and I said, "Can I come out there?"
Mm-hmm.
And so again, here we are with denial. Is I'm thinking. Leave New York. I'll go to Los Angeles and clean up.
Right.
Not
realizing that the tail goes right there with you. Wherever you are, there you are.
Yes.
Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. And so it was a little more controlled
mm-hmm.
in Los Angeles. And
what was the control?
Well, I wasn't on the streets, or wasn't, I didn't have a car.
Right.
I was really relying on these guys, and and then their friends introduced me to what was then called MDA.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it now? It's called yes.
Okay.
So I did that, and I wasn't really doing coke, and yeah. And so I lived out there. I was only there for a year, and then I just wanted to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back to New York and got an apartment on the Lower East Side down on Suffolk Street. And
so it was easy to get apartments back then.
It was very easy. And very easy, especially on the Lower East Side. I mean, it was dangerous. It was,
right.
It was dangerous. I had a martial arts tool that I used to carry.
Uh-huh.
It was called a pinger. It was a steel rod.
Damn, girl.
And I had a former detective that showed me how to use it. That if I was jumped,
you weren't playing.
And anyway, so I had my little apartment there, and started working in restaurants again, and then eventually, recognized that I was at a bottom,
mm-hmm.
and I got to a point where I was hopeless and desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And
what is hopeless and desperate for somebody who's in possibly that situation or on the verge of that? What does that actually look like?
Well,
what is the experience of it? That's what I really
well, for me was, I always was able to take care of myself
mm-hmm.
financially.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was getting to the point where I was giving the landlady, she lived, their business was down on the first floor, and I would give her $20, once a week or something like
mm-hmm.
that. And so I was getting further and further behind in my rent. And that was very frightening for me. And, I grew up in a family that had values and principles, and they lived with ethics, and I was really seeing myself as what's happened to me,
mm-hmm.
what's really happened to me. And, so I had what I call a moment of grace,
mm-hmm.
where I woke up one morning, and it was a morning, like every other morning.
Mm-hmm.
My apartment faced north, and I was looking at this, there's a copper steeple on 3rd Street that I could see from my kitchen window. And I looked up at this steeple, and I had this thought, it could be a very long time before the drugs and alcohol killed me. And that I recognized that I didn't know how to live my life a day at a time without a drug or alcohol. I didn't know how to live. And that was so frightening to me. Right. And that was the desperation, was I didn't know how to live, and I was afraid I would get to the point where I couldn't take care of myself.
Right. And how many years had you been living your life without a drink or drugs?
Well, I stopped drinking in 1976. This was now 1981. So for 5.5 years, I didn't drink alcohol, but I just went, I just did a nosedive into the drugs. Right. And so 5.5 years, and I was 31 years old in 1981, and I went to a 12-step program, and that began a whole new life. It began a whole new life for me. And
so I had a client who was on crack for 20 years.
Yes.
Right. So when you were doing coke, the crack epidemic was also beginning, was it not?
It was beginning, but I would do freebase, that I didn't even know anybody that did crack at that point. So
girl, you were doing it.
1980,
that's like Richard Pryor kind of like freebasing.
Yes. And that was, that's sell your soul stuff.
Right.
That was sell your soul.
To the devil.
Yeah. Sell your soul. So that was, that was freebase. And, crack was just really beginning around that time.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't
have to ask this question.
Yeah.
Because here you are, you're a white lady.
Yes.
Right. And, no, seriously. I mean, there are a lot of, or there were and still are a lot of white people that do drugs. But
yes.
The stereotype is that it's black people. And the stereotype when I came here in 1982 was it was black people that were on freebasing and doing crack and stuff like that. And they were the people that you ought to be afraid of. Right.
Yeah.
But here I am looking at you and you're like talking about freebasing. And I'm like, that's some Richard Pryor shit. Right. Because he was the only one that he caught on fire doing that.
Yeah.
So in your world, was it a mixed world or was it predominantly, because in the beginning you say you started to do the drugs.
It was definitely mixed, it was definitely mixed. And I hung out with whoever was doing drugs in the same way I was doing drugs.
So whoever was doing drugs,
yes.
the way you was doing it, whoever had some drugs to spare, you were there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow, that's amazing. So now you are at your, holy Jesus moment, take me home, bring me back kind of thing. And how did you decide to who brought you to the 12-step, or did you just walk in?
Well, I walked in, but I started seeing, when I came back to New York and was really recognizing that I was in trouble, is I started seeing a drug and alcohol counselor.
Okay.
And I didn't know she was in a program, but she apparently was. And she would give me on chits, little pieces of paper, she'd give me meetings to go to. And so that morning that I was, had that moment of clarity. Yes. I started looking around my apartment. My apartment was still, I'd been there for at least 6 months and it was still loaded with, boxes, and that I hadn't even unpacked.
Right. And I complete unpacked life.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you didn't know if you were going to stay or go.
No. And it didn't matter.
Right.
It didn't matter. And so I found a meeting on one of these papers she had given me, and went to a that meeting was that night, and went to a meeting that night, and there were a group of young people there. And these were party people. They were men that, young men that own clubs in the city. And so I thought, all right, I think I can do this. And they said, meet me at this meeting, tomorrow. And it just began my journey.
So what year was that?
1981.
1981. So it had just begun.
Yeah.
The HIV virus.
Yes.
This thing from out of we don't know where.
Yeah, and it wasn't even in 1981. Yeah, it was more into 82, 83, where people in the downtown meetings, down Lower East Side, East Village. It wasn't even the East Village. They didn't even have a name for it at that point. And the West Village is people start getting sick and dying.
Right.
And no one knew what it was. And then
so what did it look like?
Well,
I mean, like, so you'll meet a person one day and then you'll see him like a couple weeks later.
Yeah, well, or yes, you'll see them a couple weeks later, and they looked
Ravished.
they looked like they were going.
Right.
And then they would put them in the hospital, and you couldn't go see them. That this was back when they had the red, the skull and crossbones red on the door. You couldn't go into the rooms, and so and then there were, because it was part of this recovery community, is there were these memorial services. That was what started too, is all these memorial services, and you'd be sitting next to a dear friend holding their hand, and they'd lean over and whisper, "Is mine going to be the next one?"
Right.
And it was frightening.
Right.
And so one of the things that the only thing that people really knew to do was that people started talking about this macrobiotic diet that Michio Kushi brought from Japan. And he designed this diet based for cancer patients. And so I started reading about it, became very interested in this, and changed my diet, completely changed my diet. And I just thought, if I have the virus, then let me do whatever I can. Let me do whatever I can to take care of myself.
So what was that like for you? Okay, so what was that like for you, knowing that you had shared needles with people who could have had the virus, who did have the virus?
Definitely.
And now here you are, like getting straight, getting sober, and you're seeing memorial services every week, people holding your hand and whispering, "I have it," or "when I'm going to be next," or just scared shitless, basically.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What was that like for you? But I don't want you to say it right now. I want you to hold that thought, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you feeling unhappy with your body, shape, or size? Ever feel out of control with food? I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul. Join me to uncover the root to these imbalances and discover a permanent solution to living a healthy life. Join us every Wednesday at my new time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on talkradio.nyc.
TalkingAlternative.com.
This is Noreen Sumpter from Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way, and I'm speaking to Deborah Dunn, who is sharing her life with us. And I just want to say thank you for your generosity and sharing about your past. And, we're just mentioning that there is the opioid epidemic that's out there, that it's a cleaner form of drug, but it's, I would say, just as deadly. And also drugs, as long as there's humans, there's going to be something that is going to be exploited to fill that gap that, we all need filled in some way. And so your gap is now you start to do this macrobiotic diet. And
and I also, when I first started recovery is, I knew that I had to find some sort of spiritual path, and I was never comfortable with organized religion, and so I started doing yoga. Now this was back in in 81, in the early 80s, and so there were 3 yoga places here in Manhattan, and it was a spiritual thing, and so yoga and meditation. So I was changing my diet, doing yoga, doing meditation, and which was a huge shift from my previous life, and so it began this this journey, and it really took me to what I do now as work.
Right. So we're going to get to that. So you're cleaning up. So when was the day? I mean, I know you probably thought about it back and forth, but when was the day when you actually said, you know what, I just have to go find my status?
Oh, it was pretty early.
Right.
It was once people started getting diagnosed, and then that they actually started calling it AIDS. I mean, they didn't even identify it then as HIV. It was referred to as AIDS back then, and so and I've been tested a gazillion times, and and I never had a positive.
Right.
I never had
because my brother-in-law died of it, and we don't know if he was gay, if he had intravenous. We have no idea how he got it. But literally, it took him a matter of months, and he went from a really fat guy to a guy that was non-existent till he actually just died.
Rough, terrible.
So now you're doing this diet, and you're doing the yoga, and this becomes your new drug of choice, healthy living.
Yes.
How did you become a meditational, tell me your title in your actual title.
Well, I'm a holistic health counselor, and yoga and meditation are a very big part of that. And so those are the things that were really they were key in my life. They still are today. And if I just believe without a shadow of a doubt that it's life changing.
Right.
It's life changing, and that it changed my life in profound ways.
And am I right to say that it literally, because what I'm having an experience of you is that it changed the wiring in your brain?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And one of the interesting things is that the first 2 years that I would go to yoga classes is I would cry, and I would be so embarrassed and so ashamed. I would be doing yoga postures and tears just running down my face. And this beautiful Swami, teacher came over to me, and he pulled me aside, and he said, "It's okay. Just let it happen." He said, all that you're getting rid of has been stored in your muscles and in your tissues, and this is part of your cleansing process. And then I became a yoga teacher, and I would see this in students, and I'd be able to say the same thing to them. And that it's yoga really doing an asana practice, and also this recognition with alcoholism addiction, any kind of addiction, is about the mind.
Right.
And so, I mean, meditation is how we get to learn about our mind.
Right.
And so it's everything dovetails.
Right.
Really.
So would it be right to say that one manages one's thought, one can never control the mind? What would you say?
Yes. We have no control over our thoughts that come.
Right.
And they say that a human being, an adult human being has approximately 60,000 thoughts a day.
Right.
60,000
I had much
thoughts
more than that.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
I had
Those are maybe when you're awake.
no. I would say I've heard much more than I think like a million or whatever. But I mean myself, I probably have gazillion.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, and we don't know this until we sit and we
Right.
watch them on.
Yeah, I
and
meditate every day. I meditate first thing in the morning, 20 minutes, and then I
Beautiful.
meditate at night, 20 minutes.
Beautiful.
And how I started meditating was like 1 minute a day, like 1 minute
Yes.
each time.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it was literally, it was like shit would just come from my brain, and then stuff that would come through my brain that happened 1,000 years ago. And it was just like, I would see myself watching it. Then I'd be like, oh no. And then over time, I just learned to acknowledge it and let it go, let it pass through.
Yes.
And then, but I've been able to meditate for hours.
Yes.
Because I love it. Once you start doing it, you crave it.
Yes. Need it.
So,
I need it. Yeah.
Yeah. So now how is it like? Tell us about your practice, and tell us about like how the life that you lived in the past has contributed to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I do. I've done a practice every day,
Right.
yoga and meditation since the very beginning.
Right.
And one of the things that deepened this for me, and the work I do as a holistic health counselor, is I went to a school, became certified as a holistic health counselor,
Mhm.
and the director of that school took second-year students, a small group of them, to India,
Mhm.
and which has been another big part of my my life
Mhm.
in recovery. It's been a big part of my journey. So
Going
this
to
was
India.
15 years ago, and and then that really has shaped the direction of my life.
Mhm.
And I take retreats there now, and having experienced a culture, living in a culture. I lived there for 6 years, and living in a very different culture is it changes a person. Yeah.
So Deb, tell us, what's your favorite client? I mean, like, what is your favorite client to work with, first and foremost?
Somebody who's struggling, and they're desperate, and they're willing, they're looking for help.
Mhm.
So whatever that might be.
Mhm.
And it's I work with people who have just gotten a serious diagnosis. It
Mhm.
may be cancer, it may be diabetes, it
Mhm.
may be heart disease,
Mhm.
and they know they need to
Transform something.
yes, they have to transform. They have to change their lifestyle. They have to
Mhm.
change their diet. I love working with them.
Mhm.
I teach therapeutic yoga now,
Mhm.
and so it's there's so many amazing yoga teachers and
Mhm.
yoga programs in New York City now, and so I've decided to just do that on an individual basis. And I like working with people with Parkinson's, with MS, with serious arthritis,
Mhm.
where I can make a difference in their lives.
Mhm.
And
So when's your next trip to India?
Well, I'm planning again to go. We went to Manali. We went to the Himalayas last September,
Mhm.
and that was an amazing trip. And I've tweaked that a little bit. I'm going to be offering that in the spring.
Mhm.
So looking forward to that.
Right. And you have 3 daughters.
I have 3 amazing daughters, and they were born in recovery, and 2 of them live here in New York.
Mhm.
These are identical twins,
Mhm.
and one is right brain, one's left brain. One's in law school, one's an amazing painter, artist. And the other one, my oldest daughter, my dear daughter Dara, lives in Portugal.
Mhm.
She lives in a sustainable community, and she is a peace worker.
Right.
And she travels all over the world, and pulls refugees out of oceans and things like that.
Right. So let me ask you. So if there was, I just got this thought to ask you, if you were given a chance to live your life over again, what's one thing that you would change?
Ooh.
Given that you wouldn't be you.
Yeah. I don't have any regrets about my life. I don't have any regrets about my life. I feel like each aspect of my life has taken me to where I am now, and I love my life, and it's been an amazing journey.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you so much for being on this show. Like
Thank you.
I always want more time, you know, because there's just so much to learn about person, and you can't learn it all in an hour. But I just hope that this show tonight has made a difference in somebody's life, somebody who needs to reach out. Can you give us your email address, please?
Yes. Deborah Dunn, DeborahDunn 50@gmail.com.
Thank you. So this is Noreen Sumpter finishing up with Deborah Dunn on Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. Thank you for sharing yourself so candidly with us. I really, really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And if no one ever tells you they appreciate you, I appreciate you. Okay.
Thank you, Noreen.
So I'll see you next week when we have Mr. Garrison on the line. And Mr. Garrison is a young man that was shot in the back and is paralyzed from the waist down. But honey, let me tell you, he is rocking. So until next week, I will see you all later. Bye.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.